Look who crawled out of the toolbox, my poor ex.
So this is the famous Henry. Babe, he's exactly how you described him.
Still broke, Henry? Still alone after 8 years?
I'm married, Denise.
The group chat says hi, Chief. So where is she? In your imagination?
For the parking meter, sweetheart. Valet is 30.
She's on her way.
Sure she is. Married to who, buddy? A ghost?
Everybody a toast to my ex-husband, Henry Mitchell. Proof that some men peak at 17. Sorry I'm late, baby. Is that Grace Mitchell?
Have you ever watched someone toast their own downfall? Comment where you are watching from. Drop a like. And let us rewind. 2 days before the reunion. On a gray Chicago Thursday that could not decide if it wanted to rain. Henry Mitchell sat in his work truck on Lakeshore Drive with a coffee going cold in the cup holder and the biggest secret in the city sitting quietly in his phone. The message was from his attorney. 4 words. All signatures in. Congratulations. 18 months of negotiation. Audits. And lawyers billing by the breath. Ending in one sentence with no exclamation point. That morning, a national infrastructure fund had completed its purchase of a minority stake in Mitchell Infrastructure Group. The company Henry had built from one borrowed pickup truck and a set of his grandfather's framing tools. The deal valued the company at $2.1 billion. Henry still owned most of it, which meant that somewhere between a red light and a lane change on Lakeshore Drive, a 50-year-old black man from the South Side, sitting in a dusty truck, had quietly become a billionaire. And the only living soul he told that day was his wife. The announcement was set for Monday. Legal liked it quiet. Henry liked it quieter. He had spent 20 years learning that the loudest thing on any job site is usually the thing about to fail. The reunion invitation had been sitting in his phone for a month. His oldest friend Vivian Hart had been pushing him for weeks. In that same no-nonsense tone she had carried since 10th grade, "You've spent 8 years rebuilding your life in silence. Henry, go to that reunion. Not to prove anything, just to close the door properly." He almost said no. 8 years earlier, Denise had walked out of their small house on the South Side with 2 suitcases and a look on her face like she had moved on long before she packed the first one. Henry had not chased her down the street. He had not called her family begging for another chance. He let her go, and he went quiet. Some folks mistake quiet for broken. They have never been the same thing. He had rebuilt the way he built everything. One honest day at a time with nobody watching. A company that grew from patching porches to pouring bridge decks. A home in the Gold Coast with a porch light that was always on. And Grace Mitchell ran an education foundation that put money into schools on the South and West Sides. Work she cared about more than any gala in the city. She had met Henry 3.5 years earlier at a community fundraiser, where she watched a man in a good jacket stay 2 hours after the cameras left to help an old custodian stack folding chairs. She had married the chair stacking. She liked to say, the rest of him was a bonus. She was the second thing he thought about at every red light. The first, lately, was his grandmother. Mabel Mitchell had raised him on a porch on 79th Street, in a rocking chair that had been creaking since Eisenhower was president. And she had a saying she polished like silver. Baby, the folks who talk the loudest about your failures are usually the ones most afraid you are about to prove them wrong. She never lived to see the company outgrow its first warehouse. Henry wore his father's plain steel watch every day, and kept his grandmother's sentence where other men keep their anger. So on Saturday night, he put on a plain charcoal suit. No flash, no statement. Grace had a foundation board meeting running late, and she told him to go ahead. She would catch up with him there. The Marriott lobby smelled like fresh-cut flowers and expensive coffee. A jazz trio played something low and brassy near the elevators. And outside, rain tapped soft against the glass, while the streetlights blurred gold and red down Michigan Avenue. In the elevator mirror, Henry straightened his jacket and took one slow breath. Not to prove a single thing, he reminded himself. Just to close a door that had been left cracked open for 8 long years. Then the elevator opened onto gold chandeliers and low jazz, onto a ballroom full of name tags and old ghosts. And the very first voice he heard, carrying over all of it the way it always used to when she thought she had won something, belonged to his ex-wife. She was mid-laugh. She had spotted him already. And Denise Crawford, who did not know about the truck, or the fund, or the 4-word message from an attorney, turned to her circle of old classmates with her champagne high and her voice pitched for the cheap seat, and began the most expensive performance of her life. Denise Crawford had not changed. She had upgraded. The dress was newer. The diamonds were louder. And the laugh had been rehearsed in better rooms. But the instinct underneath it all was the same one Henry had lived with for 11 years of marriage. Find the softest person in the room and stand on them until you feel tall. And in a ballroom like this one, a wealthy white woman aiming that instinct at the quiet black man at the back table could still count on half the room laughing along without asking why. Oh my God. Everybody. Look who crawled out of the toolbox. Her voice carried across the ballroom exactly the way it used to carry across their kitchen. Heads turned. Name tags swiveled. A circle formed around her, the way circles always formed around Denise. Half friends. Half witnesses. The reunion committee had done its best. Gold balloons. A slideshow of yearbook photos cycling on a screen by the stage. A DJ who had promised himself he would not play the electric slide before 9. 200 people who had not seen each other in decades, quietly sorting each other into winners and losers, the way reunions always do. My poor ex. Still broke. Still a nobody. After all these years. Henry set down his ice water and stood, because his grandmother had raised him to stand when someone approached. Even someone approaching like weather. Denise, you look well. I look expensive. She corrected. To laughter. There's a difference. You wouldn't know it. The man beside her was tall, white, groomed within an inch of his life, wearing a suit that cost more than it fit. Her new husband. The wedding had been 8 months ago. In wine country. And the group chat had been shown every photograph. Henry did not know his name yet. What he noticed first was not the face. It was the eyes. And where they went. They dropped to Henry's wrist, to the plain steel watch he had worn every day for 6 years. The one that had belonged to his father. The man was not admiring it. He was measuring it. The way a pawnbroker measures. The way a man looks at a number he does not want anyone to know he is calculating. Blake. Baby. Film this, Denise said, reaching for her husband's sleeve. The group chat has been asking about him for years. Blake Doyle lifted his phone sideways and started recording, grinning around the room for approval. Say hi to the group chat. Buddy, you're famous tonight. Henry looked into the lens the way he looked into concrete pours and payroll audits. Calm, thorough, unbothered. Somewhere behind him, a few classmates shifted, and one woman with sharp eyes and folded arms did not laugh at all. Angela Reeves. Back in school, she was the one who would tell you the truth about your science project when everyone else said it was fine. These days, Henry had heard. She audited vendor compliance on municipal contracts. The kind of job where you notice the details people pray you will miss. Denise stepped closer, and her perfume arrived before she did. She reached out, tucked a folded $20 bill into Henry's breast pocket, and patted it twice. Slow. The way you tip a bellhop you intend to complain about anyway. For the parking meter. Sweetheart, I know valet is 30. The circle howled. Somebody whistled. A man Henry did not recognize said, not quietly. Didn't. He used to talk about building something big. Guess all that's left is the ego and a tool belt. Henry did not touch the bill. He let it sit in his pocket like evidence. 3 people laughed harder. One woman lowered her phone and did not raise it again. Rooms turned quietly. In ones and twos. Long before anybody notices they are turning. I'm married. Denise. For one full second, the cluster around her went silent. Then Denise laughed. A big, performative laugh. The kind designed to convince a room before it convinces the person laughing. Married. Y'all hear this? Henry says he's married. She turned a slow circle, gathering her audience the way a conductor gathers an orchestra. A man who couldn't build a stable life in 8 years suddenly has a wife nobody has ever heard of. An imaginary wife. Did you invent a whole woman to save face? Henry, where is she? Does she live in your head with the rest of your big plans? 3 years now? Henry said evenly. She's on her way. Sure she is. Denise waved a hand like she was swatting a fly. Still poor. Still alone. Even if you've invented somebody to sit next to you. Inventing an entire marriage. That's almost sad. Henry. Almost. He let it land and pass through him without taking root. Anger is a poor tenant. Let it stay too long and it stops paying rent and starts tearing up the walls. He had learned that the hard way. And the hard way had a date and an address. Because her words dragged him somewhere, he had not let himself go in years. A night on the south side. Rain coming down hard enough to bounce. Henry, 31 years old, standing outside a downtown conference center in a thin, soaked jacket, waiting for Denise to finish a networking event for a certification program she wanted badly. 2 weeks earlier, he had sold his grandfather's framing tools. The good steel ones. The ones that had put him through his first construction jobs, so she could afford the enrollment fee. He never told her where the money came from. He did not need gratitude. He needed her to have a shot. When she finally came out that night and saw him drenched to the bone, she did not say thank you. She looked at him like a stain on the evening and said, "Why do you look so pathetic right now?" He said nothing. Then, he said nothing most nights of that marriage. He thought silence was patience. He knew better now. There had been other nights. The year he pulled double shifts on a warehouse renovation in Bridgeport to cover her sister's wedding gift, and heard Denise tell her mother the money had been her idea. The Thanksgiving he drove 4 hours round trip to fix her cousin's water heater for free. Because it makes the family look good. And came home to a cold plate and a closed bedroom door. None of it had felt like sacrifice at the time. It had felt like love. The only way he knew how to say it. A man can pour his whole self into a cup that somebody else has already decided not to drink from. It took him years to learn that. It took her leaving. And then, 2 years after the divorce. It took him 11 months to track down the man who had bought his grandfather's tools. And 3 times the price to bring them home. They sat today in a glass case in the lobby of Mitchell Infrastructure Group, under a small brass plate that said, simply, "Start here." Denise knew none of that. Denise was still performing. "You know what the saddest part is," she said. Emboldened by the laughter, stepping close enough that her diamonds threw little knives of light across his jacket. You actually thought you'd amount to something. All that talk back in school about building something real? And look at you. Same tired suit. Same tired face. Some men just don't have it in them. Blake leaned toward her and murmured something with his eyes still on the steel watch. A quick, calculating glance. Gone as fast as it came. Denise did not notice. She was busy scanning her circle for the next laugh. My wife had a late meeting downtown. Henry said, "Steady. She'll be here." "Sure she will." Denise rolled her eyes toward her friends. A whole imaginary wife. Across the room, Angela Reeves caught Henry's eye. She did not smile. She gave him the smallest nod. The kind that says, "I see this. And I have seen more than this. And some of it has paperwork. You should slow down," Henry said quietly. Not unkind. Factual. You're about to say something you can't take back. For a half second, something uncertain flickered behind Denise's eyes. Then the performance smoothed back over it, and she reached for Blake's arm and pulled him half a step forward, presenting him like an exhibit. "Slow down, Henry. I have absolutely nothing to slow down for. I have my life together. I have Blake. And you have what? A tool belt and an imaginary wife." She took her glass back from her friend, stepped up on the toes of her heels, and raised it high enough for the chandeliers. Everybody, a toast to Henry Mitchell. Proof that some men peak at 17 and spend the next 25 years apologizing for it. The circle drank. Blake got the whole thing in one shot. The toast. The laughter. The calm man, with a folded 20 in his breast pocket, lifting a glass of ice water, half an inch to absolutely no one. And then, at the far end of the ballroom, under the low jazz, both doors began to open. And the room did the thing rooms do when they decide. Without being told, that something important just walked in. Denise had not heard it yet. She was still laughing. She was still certain the ground beneath her was solid. It was not. Not anymore. The doors at the far end of the ballroom swung wide, and half the room turned. It was the dessert cart. 2 hotel staff wheeled in a tower of small chocolate things under a spotlight that suddenly felt sarcastic. And Denise Crawford got the biggest laugh of her night without even trying. Oh, everybody. Look, is that her? Is that the wife? She shaded her eyes toward the cart like a sailor scanning a horizon. No. Just cake. Tragic. Henry. She was almost real that time. The circle around her roared. Somebody clapped. Henry checked his father's watch without hurry. Grace's board meeting had run 20 minutes past long, which meant she was probably in the car. Which meant the clock on this entire evening was already running. Denise just could not hear it ticking. She was too busy discovering the microphone. The DJ never stood a chance. Denise crossed to his booth, mid-song, held out her hand with the full confidence of a woman who had never once been told no by a man with a ponytail, and tapped the mic twice, the sound booming through the ballroom like small thunder. Testing. Hi. Everybody. Quick addition to tonight's program. Her smile swept the room. The reunion committee did awards earlier. Most successful. Furthest traveled. Cutest couple. But they missed one. They always miss one. She let the pause build. 200 faces turned toward her. Some grinning. Some already wincing. All of them watching. Because that is the terrible physics of a microphone. It makes an audience out of people who would rather be witnesses. The most unchanged award, Denise announced, goes to my ex-husband. Henry Mitchell, scattered laughter. A spotlight operator, confused, actually swung a light toward the back tables and found Henry sitting behind his glass of ice water with the stillness of a man posing for a portrait nobody had commissioned. Same face. Denise counted on her fingers. Mike. In the other hand, same haircut, same dollar store watch. And baby. I know it's the same one. Because I lived with it. Beside the stage. Blake called out. Same watch, for sure. And toasted the room with his champagne. 25 years? People. And this man has not changed a single thing about his life, except the address where he keeps his tool belt. She was not done. She produced a cocktail napkin from Blake's pocket and read from it like a citation. Though everyone could see, the napkin was blank. A brief career retrospective junior year. Henry says he will build skyscrapers. Senior year. Henry says he will own a company someday. Age 50. She looked up, milked the beat, and brought the mic close. Henry owns a ladder. Some of the room laughed, not all of it, at the bar. A former linebacker studied his beer, near the slideshow screen. Two women exchanged the kind of glance that files a report. Angela Reeves had stopped even pretending to smile, and stood with her arms folded, so tight her rings left marks. Henry sat still and let it rain. And while it rained, his grandmother rocked through his memory the way she always did when rooms got loud. Baby. The folks who talk the loudest about your failures are usually the ones most afraid you are about to prove them wrong. Mabel Mitchell had been gone 11 years. Her sentence had not aged a day. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being underestimated by the same person for so many years that it stops feeling like an insult and starts feeling like weather. Something you live under, not something you fight. Henry had stopped fighting it years ago. Not because he gave up, because he had found a better use for the energy. And the better use had cranes on it now. At home. In the bottom drawer of his old desk, there was a notebook that knew every sentence Denise was performing tonight. In 100 she had retired. He had not opened it in over a year. He would think about that drawer again before the night was over. He did not know that yet. Vivian Hart arrived at his elbow like a change in temperature. Henry Mitchell. I swear on my mother's cornbread. Say the word, and I will unplug that speaker. Let her finish. Finish, baby. She's doing an encore. Vivian sat down hard in the chair beside him. Glaring across the ballroom. I told you to come close a door. I did not tell you to stand in it while she slams it on your fingers for sport. You told me to close it properly. Henry turned his glass a slow quarter turn on the tablecloth. Properly takes a minute. Vivian leaned closer. Dropped her voice under the music. Does she have any idea about Monday? Nobody has any idea until Monday. Vivian let out a long, low whistle and looked across the room at Denise with something close to pity. So the woman is up there tap dancing on a landmine, and she brought a microphone to do it. Vivian studied the side of his face the way she had been studying it since 10th grade, and whatever she found there made her sit back and stop arguing. Later she would tell people that was the exact moment she knew. Not because he looked like a man about to win, because he looked like a man who already had, and was politely waiting for the room to catch up. Across the ballroom, Blake Doyle stepped out of the spotlight's edge and bent over his phone. Not filming now. Texting. Fast. With the thumb speed of a man doing damage control. Angela Reeves drifted 2 steps closer to him at the bar, with the gravity of an accident that had decided to happen slowly, and ordered a club soda she did not want. Doyle Consulting. Right, she said. Pleasant as a toll booth. Blake's thumbs stopped. Do I know you? Angela Reeves. I run vendor compliance audits. Municipal contracts. Mostly. She stirred her soda once. Your company's name has a way of appearing in my files. Appearing. And then disappearing. That is a rare talent. Mr. Doyle. Paperwork usually is not shy. Blake's face did something complicated and landed on a smile that had sweat under it. You must be thinking of a different firm. That is possible. Angela lifted her glass, held his eyes over the rim, and did not drink. I am very rarely thinking of a different firm. She walked away and left him standing at the bar with his phone glowing and his collar suddenly 1 size too small. He deleted 2 messages, typed a third, deleted that too, and then searched her name with the champagne warming untouched at his elbow. Whatever the search returned made him set the glass down and not pick it up again. He drifted back to Denise's orbit and murmured at her ear. Low. With the smile still bolted on. Why do you even care this much about the guy? He's nobody. Denise did not even turn her head. Because a room needs a loser. Baby. She lifted her glass toward the crowd. You pick one. Or you become one. First rule of every party I have ever survived. Blake laughed. It came out a half-second late, and it did not reach his eyes. Because men who read rooms for a living had started hearing something in this one that sounded faintly, like a floor giving notice. Meanwhile, Denise had surrendered the microphone to a smattering of uncomfortable applause and returned to her circle, riding the leftover laughter like it was proof of something. She found Henry again, because of course she did. A performer always returns to the seat that gave her the best show. Okay. She caught her breath through a grin. I'll be nice. Let's give the man a chance. The wife. The famous invisible wife. She held out her open palm to the circle, presenting the bit. Show us a picture. Henry 1. Picture. Every married man has 1,000. Show us one. His phone lay on the table beside his water. Before he could move, she snatched it up herself, flipped it over, and lit up the lock screen for her friends to see. The photo was a bridge. Steel arches over gray water at dawn, shot from a work barge. The first big span his company had ever repaired. Denise held it above her head like a trophy from a rummage sale. A bridge, y'all. He's married to a bridge, the circle screamed with laughter. She wiped a tear, handed the phone back with 2 fingers like it was sticky. Oh, honey, 25 years, and the most romantic thing in your life is public infrastructure. Careful, Denise, Henry said, taking his phone back gently. You're going to want to remember tonight, in order. What is that supposed to mean? He did not answer. Because he did not have to. Because at that exact moment, the jazz trio dropped half a step lower on its own. The way rooms sometimes conduct themselves. And the double doors at the far end of the ballroom opened again. No dessert cart this time. A hush moved inward from the entrance like a tide finding its level. And somewhere in that hush, close enough for Denise to hear it clearly, a woman near the bar whispered to her friend, both of them already turning. Wait, is that Grace Mitchell, the one who runs the education fund for the South and West Side schools? Denise turned toward the doors with the smile still on her face. It was the last time that particular smile would ever fit her. Grace Mitchell entered a ballroom the way weather fronts enter a forecast. Nothing loud. Everything different. She wore deep, midnight blue. Curls swept up. A breathtakingly beautiful black woman moving through the gold light with the unhurried certainty of someone who had never once needed a room's permission to belong in it. The jazz seemed to dim half a step on its own. Heads turned in a slow wave from the doors inward, and the whispers moved faster than she did. "Is that Grace Mitchell from the Education Fund? She spoke at my niece's school." "That's her." "What is she doing at our reunion?" Denise turned with the rest of them, drink still raised from her last joke, and watched the most recognized woman in the room cross the marble straight toward the back tables, straight toward the man with the folded $20 bill in his breast pocket. Grace took Henry's hand in both of hers and pressed a kiss to his cheek in front of everyone. "Sorry I'm late. Baby." The meeting ran long. The word baby detonated softly across the circle. A champagne glass stopped halfway to someone's mouth and stayed there. Forgotten. The man who had joked about the tool belt developed a sudden fascination with the carpet. Grace leaned in once more, close enough that only Henry could hear. Her smile, never moving. Two things. Vivian texted me the play-by-play, so I came in slow on purpose. A breath. And the fund's press office called. They moved the announcement up. "It goes public tomorrow morning." Not Monday. Henry felt that land, quiet and steady in his chest. The way news lands, when you have stopped needing it to prove anything to anybody but yourself. Tomorrow morning, every person in this ballroom would wake up, pour coffee, open a phone, and read a headline with his name in it. Tonight was the last night of his life as a roomer. He decided, watching his ex-wife's face begin its slow arithmetic, that he was in no hurry at all. Denise recovered first. Or tried to. "I'm sorry." Her voice came out one register too high. You're his wife." Grace turned to her, warm as a porch light, and exactly as unbothered. 3 years next month? And I am very proud of my husband. My wife. Not a rumor. Not an invention. Standing in a room that had spent 20 minutes toasting her non-existence. Wearing midnight blue. Here is the truth about that night. The part Henry only understood later. Denise's cruelty was never really about him. It was insurance. 8 years of it. Paid against one specific fear she had carried since the divorce. The fear that trading a loyal man for a shinier one might have been the worst decision of her life. Mocking Henry in front of people who remembered their wedding was not confidence. It was a performance for an audience of one. And the one was herself. Grace, walking through that door, was not a surprise guest. She was the fear. Arriving in person. In heels. On a Saturday. Well, Denise manufactured a laugh from somewhere, and it came out thin. "That's wonderful. I had no idea Henry had. Had someone like you. Most people don't take the time to find out what someone actually has." Grace said it without a single degree of malice, which somehow made it land harder. Just fact. Delivered gently. The way nurses deliver news. Denise glanced at Henry. Then back at Grace. Then did the thing Henry had watched her do his entire marriage. She reached for higher ground. "So, how did you two even meet? Because Henry isn't exactly... look, no offense. But you're you. And he was stacking chairs. Grace's face softened into the memory. A fundraiser 3.5 years ago. Cameras left. Caterers left. Everybody important left. And there was one man in a good jacket helping the custodian carry folding chairs to a supply closet at 11 at night. I asked around about him. Nobody knew his name. She looked up at her husband. I decided to learn it. That's... Denise's smile was fighting for its life. Sweet. So, it was Blake who said it. Stepping into the circle, with his phone finally lowered. His voice pitched casual and landing anywhere. But, what is it you do these days? Henry Still. In construction, I run a construction and infrastructure company. Henry said. Simply. We closed something with the city this week. He did not say the number. He did not need to. Some truths do not need volume. They need only time. And this one had until tomorrow morning. But Blake Doyle had spent the whole night measuring a steel watch. And men who measure for a living know when a number refuses to fit the frame. He shifted his weight, leaned toward Denise, and murmured the sentence he would spend the next several weeks wishing he had swallowed. You never said anything about him actually having money. Denise shot him a look, sharp enough to draw blood. Too late. Henry caught it. Grace caught it. And across the room. Arms still folded. Angela Reeves caught it too. And finally allowed herself one small, patient smile. Because Angela had spent 2 years sitting on a piece of paperwork, waiting to learn whether tonight was the night. It was. Denise thought the hardest part of her evening was behind her. It had not even started. Angela Reeves did not wait for an invitation. She crossed the ballroom with the steady, unhurried stride of a woman who had been waiting 2 years for the right moment, and stopped at the edge of the circle. Denise, she said, clear enough to carry? That's enough. Denise blinked. Angela, this doesn't concern you. It does. Actually, Angela's arms stayed folded. Her tone stayed level, which somehow made the whole ballroom lean in. Because some of us have known for years exactly what kind of man Henry is. And I have watched you spend an entire evening and a microphone pretending otherwise. She let the room settle into full silence before she spent it. What most people here don't know is that for the last 6 years, Henry Mitchell has personally funded the entire scholarship endowment at our old high school. Every one of those scholarship kids you all clapped for at the alumni dinners. That's him. No plaque. No name. Not even a thank you card. Because he blocked the school from sending them. I found out by accident last spring, going through the fund's compliance paperwork, and he asked me to keep it quiet. She paused. I am done keeping it quiet. A ripple moved through 200 people at once. Somebody near the stage said, "Wait, that's been Henry this whole time." And the sentence hopped table to table like a struck match. The woman who had filmed the $20 bill lowered her phone and looked briefly ill. Henry felt something tighten and loosen in his chest at the same time. He thought of the first check, written alone at his kitchen table past midnight 6 years ago, and how he had told himself it did not need his name attached to matter. He had expected pride if this moment ever came. What he felt instead was strangely exposed. Like a door he kept locked out of habit, had been opened by a locksmith he trusted. He did not reach for credit. He never had. He just held his wife's hand and let the truth walk around the room on its own legs. Denise's face had gone the color of the tablecloths. Her mouth opened. No comeback lived there anymore. Angela was not finished. She turned, deliberately, to Blake Doyle. And you might want to sit the next part out very quietly, she said, because I know exactly what you tried to do to Henry's company 2 years ago. The falsified subcontractor bid. The shell paperwork routed through a fake vendor account to skim off a city project. It failed, because Henry's team caught it at intake and shut it down without a word of press. Her eyes did not blink. I audited that file. Mr. Doyle, your fingerprints are all over the vendor account. And I have wondered, for 2 years, exactly one thing. She turned back. Denise, you knew. Didn't you? You covered for him. The color left Denise's face entirely. She turned to Blake, and her voice cracked down the middle. You told me that was a misunderstanding. You said the paperwork was a mix-up. You said, don't. Blake stepped back from her. Half a step. Distancing himself in real time in front of 200 witnesses. Don't make this about me right now. His hand had gone tight around his glass. Knuckles pale against the crystal. The practiced ease slid off his face for half a second. And what sat underneath was colder and busier. The same expression he had worn all night, studying another man's watch. A man running numbers on an exit. Not an apology. Somewhere near the punch table, a woman murmured to her husband. Not quietly enough. I always wondered how Blake afforded that condo on consulting fees. Word travels fast in a room that has decided to stop being polite. Vivian Hart appeared at Henry's elbow, having crossed the floor the moment the unraveling started, and stood watching Denise the way you watch weather you predicted years ago, and nobody listened. I told you, closing the door properly might take the door off its hinges. She murmured. Henry almost laughed. Almost. Because Denise was turning in a slow circle now, searching the faces that had laughed at every joke, backed every toast, drunk every drop of her performance, and finding them suddenly very interested in the bar. Their shoes. The slideshow. The middle distance. The circle that had orbited her for 25 years was drifting, table by table, into open space. A crowd is loyal to a show, not to its star. The show was over. And the man she had toasted as a failure stood quietly at the center of the new one, with a folded 20 still in his breast pocket, deciding what mercy should look like. Denise turned back to Henry, and the arrogance that had carried her through the evening finally cracked all the way down to what lived under it. Desperation. With mascara. You knew. Her voice wobbled. About the bid. About Blake's scheme against your company. And you never said anything. Not to me, not to anyone I knew. Henry's voice stayed level. My legal team caught it at intake. We handled it without needing to make a scene. I don't build scenes. Denise. I build everything else. She stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time in 8 years. Maybe she was. Why didn't you ever tell me? Grace answered before he could. Calm and unmistakably firm. The way a foundation is firm. Because there is something else you should know. Denise. Henry knew about you and Blake long before the divorce was ever filed. Years before. The room went still enough to hear ice shifting in a glass 3 feet away. Denise's eyes went wide, then filled. You knew. This whole time I knew. Henry said, then why didn't you say something? Why did you just let it happen? Because for a long time, he said, no anger left in it. Just plain truth, laid flat on the table between them. I thought if I stayed quiet enough, worked hard enough, you would eventually choose me on your own. I did not want to force it. I wanted you to see me. He paused, and the pause held 8 years. You never did. And eventually, I stopped needing you to. Denise turned to Blake one last time, her voice breaking into something raw and unguarded. Past caring, who filmed it now? You told me you'd give me the life Henry never could. You said I would never have to worry again. I lied for you. I told my own mother the condo was legitimate. I told everyone in this room tonight that you were the better choice. What happened to all of that? Blake straightened his jacket. already halfway out of the building in his mind. That sounds like a you problem. Denise. He set his glass on a passing tray and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. And the crowd parted for him the way crowds part for ambulances. Out of instinct rather than respect. Somewhere behind Henry, an older voice murmured, "Lord have mercy," in the tone reserved for slow-motion collisions that everyone saw coming except the drivers. Henry looked at his ex-wife, standing alone in the wreckage of her own evening. In front of everyone, she had spent 25 years trying to impress. And he felt the strangest thing. Nothing sharp. Nothing sweet. Just a quiet, settled stillness. Like a door easing closed on its own weight. He turned to Grace. And without a word passing between them, they walked toward the doors. Behind him, one last time, he heard Denise's voice. Thin now, stripped of every ounce of performance it had carried all night. "Henry, wait, please, just wait a second." He did not turn around. The rest, as they say in Chicago, made the papers. At 6 the next morning, the announcement went out on the wire, and 200 hungover reunion attendees woke up to the same headline over the same coffee. Southside builder becomes city's newest billionaire. Mitchell Infrastructure, valued at $1 billion in landmark deal. There was a photograph, plain charcoal suit, steel watch, the same tired face, as somebody had called it 9 hours earlier. Staring out from every phone in the class, group chat, the chat, survivor's report, went silent for 11 full minutes. Then somebody posted the clip Blake had filmed of the toast. And somebody else replied with the headline, and the two of them sat there side by side. The mockery and the math, doing what the internet does best. By Monday, the clip had escaped the group chat. By Wednesday, a morning show had run it under the caption, "Know who you are laughing at." The folded $20 bill became a national punchline, and not the kind Denise had planned. Strangers mailed $20 bills to Mitchell Infrastructure headquarters as a joke of solidarity. And Henry, being Henry, had his office donate every one of them to the high school lunch fund without comment. The reunion committee, mortified, mailed Henry a formal apology on embossed stationery. He wrote back 2 lines and signed it by hand. No apology needed. The chicken was excellent. Angela Reeves spent her Monday morning differently. She walked her 2-year-old audit file into the City Inspector General's office, laid it beside Henry's legal team's records, and let paperwork do what paperwork does. The investigation into Doyle Consulting took 4 months. The indictment took 1 more. Falsified bids, a shell vendor account, and a skim attempt on a public project add up. And Blake Doyle, who had spent his whole life reading rooms, finally misread one that had a judge in it. He surrendered his passport, his clients, and eventually his condo. His plea deal carried 2 years, restitution, and a permanent ban from municipal contracting. The suit still did not fit. Reporters found Angela eventually, because reporters always do. Asked on camera why she had sat on the file for 2 years. She gave the answer that ended up on mugs in 3 compliance departments. "Evidence is patient," she said. "So am I." Nobody charged Denise with anything. There was nothing to charge. Covering for a husband's lie at a party is not a crime. It is only a choice. And choices have their own sentencing guidelines. Her circle of 25 years dissolved in a group chat she had once ruled. The women who had howled at her jokes stopped returning her calls. Not out of principle, but because proximity to embarrassment is a social disease. And everyone she knew had already been vaccinated. And the scholarship fund got loud. The school board asked, publicly, if they could finally put Henry's name on the endowment. He said no, the same way he had said it for 6 years. Then, after a week, he called back and offered a compromise. And that is why, above the trophy case at their old high school, there is now a small bronze plaque that does not say Mitchell anywhere on it. It says, Mabel's Kids, named for a woman who rocked on a porch on 79th Street and never lived to see the company, the ballroom, or the headline, but who had somehow seen all of it anyway. Decades early. From a creaking chair. The folks who talk the loudest about your failures are usually the ones most afraid you are about to prove them wrong. Proof, as it turned out, had simply been running 8 years behind schedule. But all of that came later. That night, there was only the drive home. They rode north along Michigan Avenue with the storefronts glowing gold on wet pavement, past a bakery closing up and a doorman checking his phone. Ordinary Chicago rolling through its ordinary evening, unaware of what had just happened 3 blocks south. There is something grounding about a city that keeps moving no matter what has fallen apart or come together. Inside one of its ballrooms, Grace broke the silence at a red light on Oak Street, her hand resting light on his arm. You never told me the whole story, she said. About knowing. About the notebook. Henry glanced over. What notebook? The one in the bottom drawer of your old desk, she said gently. I found it 2 years ago. Cleaning out the study. Pages and pages of things Denise used to say to you. Every insult. Dated. Like you were keeping records. I never brought it up. I wasn't angry. I just didn't understand it. She paused. Not until tonight. Henry kept his eyes on the road a moment before he answered. I wasn't keeping it to use against her. I was keeping it so I would never forget who I used to let define me. He exhaled, slow. Every time I thought about giving up on myself, I would read a page. Not for the sting, for the reminder. Never again. You could throw it away now, Grace said. After tonight, I might, he said, and realized as he said it that he meant it. I think I finally don't need it anymore. His phone buzzed once in the cup holder, a number he had never saved and recognized instantly. I'm sorry. For tonight. For a lot of things. He looked at it for a long moment. The light still red. The wipers ticking once across a windshield that did not need it. You don't have to answer that tonight, Grace said quietly. Or ever. I know. He turned the phone face down. Some doors do not need slamming. You can let them ease closed on their own weight. And that is its own kind of answer. At home, the porch light was on the way. Grace always leaves it. Warm against the dark. She put the kettle on. The way she does, whether they want tea or not. Because it was never about the tea. It was 10 quiet minutes at the end of a day. In a kitchen, with nothing left to prove. Henry sat at the worn oak table they had bought second-hand their first year. The one with the water ring Grace insists gives it character. And thought about the man who used to sit at a smaller table on the south side, doing midnight math on a single paycheck. That man would never have believed this kitchen. He had just needed to keep showing up. One ordinary evening at a time. Until the life was real enough to sit inside of. In the morning, they stood on the back porch with coffee going lukewarm, watching the wind move through the trees under a pale October sky. Do you hate her? Grace asked. After everything. Henry smiled. Small, but real. No. I forgave her a long time ago. What I hadn't forgiven, not until last night, was the version of me who believed he had to earn the right to be loved. He shook his head slowly. I don't owe anybody proof anymore. Not her. Not that ballroom. Not even myself. Later that morning, he opened the bottom drawer of his old desk and took out the notebook. He did not read a page. He slid one last thing between the covers first. A folded $20 bill that had spent the night in a charcoal suit pocket. Then sealed all of it in the envelope his office used for donations to Mabel's kids. The most expensive $20 Denise Crawford ever spent. Some chapters do not need a dramatic close. They just need you to stop turning back to reread them. So pick a side, because I count every comment on these stories. Team Henry, staying silent and letting the truth do the talking. Or Team Denise, because at least she says exactly what she thinks. Drop your team below. Share this with somebody out there, building their life quietly. And subscribe, because stories like this one do not tell themselves. Real talk. This one hit different. She tucked a 20 in his pocket like a tip, and 2 days later, the whole city learned his name was worth 10 figures. But the part, living rent-free in my head, is not the headline. It is the notebook. The man wrote down every insult for years, not for revenge, just so he would never mistake her voice for his own. Read that again. Then he let it go with no audience, because that is the whole point. Build quiet. Heal quiet. Let them find out from the newspaper. And be honest. Could you have stayed calm through that toast? Me? I would have been showing receipts by the appetizers.